The journey to the lost dwarven temple of Talhundereth did not begin with quiet reverence. It did not begin beneath storm-dark skies, or with the chanting of ancient names, or with solemn vows sworn beneath the eyes of forgotten gods. It began with honking, the newly purchased magical pleasure barge. The indomitable goose lurched into the Neverwinter River with all the grace of a drunken nobleman being thrown from a carriage. At the stern, 6 gilded goose heads shuddered awake. Their jeweled eyes glowed with pale blue light. Their carved beaks snapped open in uneven sequence. Honk. A burst of magical wind shoved the boat forward. Honk, honk. The boat veered sideways. Honk. A fisherman screamed and threw himself from his own vessel as the lacquered barge slid toward him with terrible ornamental confidence. Asian gripped the railing and stared at the river traffic scattering ahead of them.
Is this supposed to happen?
Sariel, standing near the goose array and already deciding that by necessity he was now the vessel's engineer, stared at the controls with solemn horror. The controls, such as they were, did not resemble a wheel. They did not resemble anything a reasonable person would call maritime equipment. Instead, the propulsion system appeared to be governed by a harness, a sequence of reins, and several levers marked with settings that seemed less like speeds and more like social attitudes. Proud glide, cruise honk, full honk. Sariel gripped the mechanism.
We needed a boat, and this is a boat.
Taven looked from the harness to the goose heads to the approaching dock traffic.
That is a generous classification.
The geese fired again. The barge lurched.
Everyone out of the way!
Sariel shouted toward the river traffic.
We cannot control this beast.
Panic briefly became procedure. Ezien suggested using a pole to keep them from smashing into things. Rowan pointed out that any pole they owned was not long enough. The possibility of dangling a party member over the side as a living bumper was raised with a seriousness that, in a lesser group, might have been alarming. Finally, Sariel leaned into the goose mechanism with arcane focus. He traced the runes, he examined the enchanted harness, he listened to the rhythm of the geese, if rhythm was the word for 6 magical waterfowl arguing through propulsion. Then, with a flash of insight and probably more confidence than the craft deserved, he adjusted the array. The honks shifted, no longer random, no longer staggered. They became synchronized. Honk, 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 honk. The indomitable goose steadied, barely. The dock receded behind them. Neverwinter's river traffic gave them a wide berth, perhaps out of courtesy, perhaps out of fear, perhaps because everyone watching instinctively understood that the vessel was technically legal, but spiritually irresponsible. Ailuin refused to entrust herself fully to the goose. At least for part of the journey, she traveled alongside in animal form, moving through the water as a dolphin. Taven looked over the side.
Are you a shark?
Ailuin surfaced just enough to make her displeasure clear.
Dolphin.
On board, Ezien looked around, seemingly both impressed and suspicious. Taven stretched out with the air of someone who had not expected to travel to a lost dwarven temple aboard a floating noble's lounge. Rowan, ever practical, tried to understand what it would take to keep the vessel from destroying itself. Sariel read aloud from the vessel's documentation, which had been provided in the form of a boatfax report. The longer they read, the worse it became. Ezien squinted at the report.
The goose heads require monthly synchronization, or the vessel may develop diagonal drift.
Sariel nodded grimly.
We know this.
Ezien continued reading.
The command lever may skip from proud glide directly to full honk without warning.
Rowan glanced toward the stern.
Someone should watch that!
Taven leaned over the report.
Emergency reverse takes 6 seconds to activate.
There was a pause. Sariel frowned.
That is actually useful to know. Also concerning.
The report continued. The boat required a bard, a tinsmith, and a licensed minor evoker for certain repairs. Counterfeit goose polish voided the warranty. Children loved it, which was itself listed as a safety issue. Several bridges had apparently posted specific notices about it. The vessel was described not as practical transportation, but as a declaration that sensible judgment had been conquered by budget, pride, and lacquer. Ezien looked up from the document.
Sariel, why did we buy this boat?
Sariel did not hesitate.
We needed to move upriver, and it is clearly the best means by which to do so, unless we all have the ability to turn into birds.
Aluin, swimming beside the boat as a dolphin, did not comment. Tavin eventually took a turn at the controls. Under Sariel's instruction, he stepped into the harness and learned how to guide the enchanted geese with small shifts of weight and pressure. Ezien folded his arms.
You are now a sailor.
Tavin looked down at the harness.
This boat has no sails.
Sariel corrected him with great seriousness.
Then you are a gooser.
Ezien considered this.
Or a honker.
Tavin's expression suggested that both titles would be rejected at the earliest opportunity. Despite the ridiculousness of it all, the journey continued. The indomitable goose made steady upriver progress at what the boatfax would probably have called a nominal honk. 5 miles an hour against the current was, in truth, impressive. By evening, the trees along the river grew thicker. The light softened. Sariel lit the boat's lanterns, turning the deck into something warm, golden, and almost romantic. If one ignored the 6 goose heads at the stern, Aluin eventually signaled toward shore with her flippers. From the boat, this was not immediately understood. Tavin leaned over the side.
She's signaling.
Sariel stiffened.
Is she in danger?
Ezien peered into the darkening water.
She might be under attack.
Rowan stared at the flipper gestures.
Is Timmy stuck in a well?
Aluin swam toward the bank with the unmistakable urgency of someone tired of being a dolphin. At last, the party understood that she wanted to rest somewhere that was not the boat. They dropped anchor. Some slept aboard the barge. Aluin remained on shore or near it, preferring solid ground and sanity. For a few hours, the night was quiet. Then morning came. Birdsong rose from the trees, light touched the water, and beneath the natural sound of the forest came something faint and deeply troubling. Honk, honk, honk. Sariel opened his eyes. The boat shifted slightly. Honk. The geese were talking to the birds. The boatfax was consulted immediately. Buried in the docking and harbour relations section was a note explaining that real birds could provoke the enchanted gooseheads into unauthorized micro-movements. Sariel stared at the line.
Unauthorized micro-movements.
He said it with the tone of a man who had found the correct legal phrase for a spiritual injury. Aluin attempted a practical solution. She lunged from the water toward one of the birds. The bird escaped. Other birds remained. The geese continued their little conversational honks. Sariel rose. He inhaled. Then, calling upon thaumaturgy, he amplified his voice to divine volume and released a booming cry across the river.
Oh!
Birds exploded from the trees. The riverbank fell silent. The geese stopped honking. The party continued upriver. As they drew closer to the region, marked by their maps and notes, the character of the land began to change. The easy riverbanks gave way to dark shelves of stone. The water narrowed and deepened. Metallic flecks glittered faintly in the rock, where the sun struck at the right angle. The trees thinned. At the upper reaches of the river, near where the markings suggested Talhundereth should lie, the party moored the indomitable goose. Ropes were tied. The boat was secured. The geese were watched with suspicion. Rowan studied the barge from the riverbank.
No one is going to be able to steal this.
Ezien looked back at the gooseheads.
Because it's secure?
Sariel shook his head.
Because it requires expertise.
Tavin added,
And poor judgment.
From there, the search began. Aluin took to the air in bird form, circling over the ridges. Tavin unfurled his wings and flew as well, scanning the hills from above. From the riverbank, the land looked like wilderness, stone, trees, slopes, shadows. But from the sky, the old shapes began to emerge, a clearing below, an abandoned camp, a place where someone had already searched. Tavin landed first. The camp was orderly but empty, cold ashes, bedroll impressions, notes weighed down by stones, charcoal rubbings, translation fragments. This had been Headmaster Orsic Vale's camp. His notes showed that he had come here seeking Talhundereth and that he had nearly solved its outer mystery. He had studied the reliefs. He had noted the 4 dwarven figures, king, smith, Miner, and Keeper. He had fixated on the Keeper's mouth, closed, hidden, sealed. His writings circled the same idea again and again. Dumathoin did not yield to command. The answer was not spoken, it was entrusted. The phrase appeared in several forms: buried, I endure; spoken, I die. Given to the Keeper, I open the way. The party regrouped and followed the clues. From above, Aeluin and Tavin had also spotted what looked like statues or reliefs set into a cliff face, visible only from the right angle. On foot, the path was nearly invisible until they were upon it. Half-buried stone, old cuts in the rock, the faint memory of stairs beneath moss and roots. Then the mountain stopped pretending to be natural. Before them stood a dark cliff face, carved with weathered dwarven figures. A crowned dwarf, a smith with raised hammer, a miner bent beneath his burden, and in the center, hooded and silent, the Keeper. The inscription was in Dwarvish, which none of them could properly read. But Bogenthal's book stirred. Its pages, once blank, seemed to darken in the presence of the runes. Through its strange magic, fragments of meaning assembled themselves and were translated into common after Aeluin cast Dispel magic on the book. Not a perfect translation, but enough. Spoken, buried, given, Keeper, open the way. The party studied the hooded figure more closely and found a small, subtle opening near the mouth. A slit, a receiving place, a mouth that did not speak. At first, the solution went poorly. Ezian produced a stick. Sariel narrowed his eyes.
Why do you have a stick?
Ezian held it up as if this explained everything.
For the mouth.
The stick was examined. A faint magical aura clung to it, which immediately redirected the solemn religious moment into an interrogation. Sariel's expression sharpened.
Why is the stick magical?
Ezian shifted his weight. Tavin looked at him.
Where did you get it?
Ezian hesitated.
The Wizard College.
Sariel stared.
You stole a magical stick from the Wizard College?
I acquired it.
Tavin folded his arms.
That is not better.
Nevertheless, Ezian put the stick into the Keeper's mouth. It vanished. The party waited. The cliff did not open. The Keeper's eyes did not glow. The mountain, having accepted the offering of one faintly magical stolen stick, appeared unmoved. Rowan looked at the empty slot.
I want you to acknowledge that if you had broken the stick in the dwarf's mouth, we might have sealed the entrance forever.
Ezian looked somewhat offended.
But I didn't.
Sariel exhaled.
An important distinction. Perhaps not a comforting one.
Eventually, the party returned to the riddle. Spoken, I die. Given to the Keeper. The answer was a secret, but saying a secret aloud was not enough. A spoken secret was no longer a secret. To answer correctly, something private had to be given silently. Sariel took parchment. He wrote something down, a secret concerning what had happened to someone close to him. He did not read it aloud. He did not explain it. He folded the parchment, placed it into the Keeper's mouth, and released it. The stone beneath his hand grew cold. The parchment vanished into the hill. For one long breath, nothing happened. Then the hooded figure's eyes kindled with a deep inner light. A seam appeared in the cliff, where no seam had been before. Dust fell in whispering sheets. Somewhere deep within the hill, stone shifted against stone. Talhundrath remembered its door. Tavin gave a secret as well. The others considered doing the same, though the way had already opened. Sariel, who had moments earlier been baffled by the abstraction of it all, congratulated those involved in solving the complex and vexing riddle while openly admitting that he despised riddles. The fate of Ezian's magical stick remained unknown. Beyond the entrance, the party entered a wide cavern that led to enormous stone double doors. Each door bore the image of a towering mountain crowned with a colored gemstone. One side stood slightly ajar. Someone had already passed through. Sariel cast find traps. The spell revealed no immediate trap intended to harm them. Sariel lowered his hand, frowning.
That does not mean there is no danger. Only that the danger is not being honest.
Rowan approached the door and found a stiff, bloody cloth wedged near the opening. At first, it looked like a rag. Then they saw the head. The cloth contained a body. The blood was dry. The corpse was human, middle-aged, dressed in dark clothing. He carried a dagger and lock-picking tools, but no gold, no crest, no obvious identity. Perhaps a thief. Perhaps a grave robber. Perhaps someone else's expendable scout. Rowan looked over the corpse.
Does he look like the headmaster?
Tavin crouched nearby.
He has a head.
Ezien blinked.
That seems like a low bar.
Tavin glanced back at the body.
Other than that, unclear.
They unwrapped the corpse further. No sign of Orsic Vale, no possessions that explained who the man was. If he had carried anything valuable, someone had already taken it. Rowan regarded the body grimly.
Whatever happened, I do not believe this was an accident.
The party propped the door open and entered. The first interior stretch of Talhundereth descended in broad stairs lined with carvings of mountains and treasure piles. Treasure, as it turned out, depicted in stone rather than lying conveniently on the floor. Several landings opened onto side doors. Statues stood in silence. Farther down, a deeper stairway was blocked by a collapse of tumbled boulders. Not everyone could see in the dark. Rather than light torches and announce their presence, Aluin cast dark vision on those who needed it. Footprints marked the ancient floor. Many tracks wandered through the chamber, but one distinct set drew attention. Down one way, then back, then through a particular door. After a philosophical debate about left doors, right doors, correct doors, and whether sinister implied wisdom or danger, the party chose a path. The door opened into a strange chamber. Many doors lined the walls. At the center stood 4 stone chairs facing one another. One chair was covered in fresh blood. This naturally caused concern. Aluin examined the bones and blood more closely.
This is not humanoid.
Rowan frowned.
Then what is it?
Aluin looked from the chair to the remains.
Goat.
Ezien stared at the bloody chair.
Someone brought a goat down here?
Rowan's expression darkened.
Someone brought a sacrifice down here.
Tavin glanced toward the many doors.
Or something was fed.
Ezien, whose knowledge of predators leaned more maritime, became briefly entangled in a discussion about what kinds of creatures did or did not eat goats. Sharks were mentioned. Kraken were mentioned. The point was raised that goats generally do not live in the ocean. Ezien considered this.
That is true.
Tavin nodded.
Not immediately helpful, but true.
The party debated whether to search the many doors one by one or follow the hallway first. Ezien compared the situation to a Monty Hall problem. Behind one door, a boat. Behind the others, flesh-eating monsters. Ezien gestured at the doors.
Do you switch?
Rowan looked unimpressed.
I would prefer not to win a second boat.
Sariel, apparently done debating, simply started walking down the hallway. The others followed. The hallway opened into a larger chamber. Inside stood a dwarf, and before him a mind flayer. For a moment the party froze. The illithid shape was unmistakable. The tentacled face, the alien bearing, the dreadful familiarity of a threat they had never fully seen but had felt pressing at the edges of their journey. The psionic goblins, the strange floating watchers, the visions of pale tentacled beings around Evan, the brain egg in Cragmore Castle, the shards and their impossible compulsions. All of it seemed to gather in that one image. But the scene was too perfect. The dwarf pointed at the mind flayer as if calling for judgment. Tavin narrowed his eyes.
This feels wrong.
Ezien drew closer, cautious.
An illusion.
Sariel raised his hand.
Then let us see.
He attacked anyway. The magic passed straight through. Tavin shot him a look.
I said it was probably fake.
The illusion continued. The dwarf raised his weapon and struck the mind flayer down, crushing its head in a brutal, echoing blow. Then the dwarf turned toward the party. He beckoned. He ran toward a chest and vanished mid-stride. Silence followed. Sariel, rather than being humbled by the failed attack, seized the moment as confirmation.
This explains the goblins,
He declared.
the psionic powers, the sway, the visions. The illithid are involved.
Tywin looked back toward where the illusion had vanished.
We do not know that this has anything to do with the current threat. This may be history.
Sariel's eyes remained fixed on the chamber.
It is the truth. I have been shown the light by my goddess.
Ezien frowned.
But we all saw this one.
Sariel nodded.
This is separate.
Ezien stared at him.
So your goddess's visions are true, and this vision is also true, but different.
Yes,
That explains nothing.
it explains enough.
Ezien looked toward the place where the Mind Flayer had stood.
They are Squidman people. That much seems clear.
Sariel turned sharply.
Have you made dealings with these creatures?
Ezien looked genuinely offended.
Why would I have made dealings with Squidmen people?
Tywin gave him a dry look.
You did say it with confidence.
I have seen squids,
Ezien replied.
and I have seen men.
While this dispute continued, others approached the chest. That was a mistake. The moment they drew near, their minds locked. Thoughts stalled, muscles froze. For an instant, it was as if the will to move had simply been removed from them. Then something emerged from the chest. It was not a Mind Flayer. Not exactly. It was a floating, squirming, angular mass, a psychic knot given flesh, a thing of tendrils and impossible geometry. It recalled the strange floating observer creatures they had seen before, but this one was stronger, crueler, more direct in its hunger. Combat erupted, or rather, combat attempted to erupt, while half the party stood paralyzed by mental force. The creature lashed out with tendrils and invisible pressure. It grappled, constricted, and drove psychic pain into the minds of those it touched. Intelligence itself became a weakness to exploit. It wrapped around Rowan, crushing and boring into him with thoughts like knives. Rowan screamed. The creature seemed to feed on the assault, rejuvenating as it broke into his mind. The fight began badly. Blows missed. Sacred fire failed to land. Tywin moved in with fists ready and found the creature slipping away from each strike, as if its body could not decide where it truly existed. Ezien and the others fought through paralysis and confusion. The chamber that had seemed like an old memory became suddenly violently present. Aelwyn worked to keep the party alive. Sariel surrounded himself with rotating beams of sacred light, stepping close enough that the creature would burn in the glow. Rowan, battered and nearly dragged down into death, was brought back by healing magic. For a moment, the party was not winning. They were simply refusing to die. Then Rowan rose. Wounded, furious, and armed with Zarathoin's fire-touched hammer, he brought divine wrath down upon the aberrant thing. The first blow struck with radiant force. The second came harder. Fire and holy power tore through the creature's shifting body. Divine smite flared in the dark chamber again and again, until the psychic horror could no longer hold itself together. Its form convulsed, shrieking in whatever language thought uses when thought is being destroyed. Then it collapsed. The room fell quiet. Around them remained the ancient chamber, the illusion's echo, the chest, the memory of a dwarf striking down an illithid, and the remains of a creature that suggested Talhundereth had not merely remembered the enemy below. It had been built because of it. Talhundereth had opened, but it had not welcomed them, and somewhere deeper beneath the mountain, beyond the collapsed stairs, beyond the goat blood, beyond the dead thief, beyond the illusion of an ancient victory over a Mind Flayer, the temple's true secret still waited in the dark. Not spoken, not forgotten, only buried.